Grocery shopping is generally regarded as a bit of a chore, something that has to be done, but not something we would choose to spend our time doing, which might explain the growth in popularity of supermarket home deliveries. And when it comes to flags on our food, most people in Britain probably don't even give it a second thought. But north of the border, it's a different story. Because if there's anything likely to rile many Scots, it's seeing the Union Jack plastered all over their groceries, especially if the items are of Scottish origin. So why is this? And why have we seen a proliferation of Union Jacks on everything from Scotch whisky to a bag of carrots? Stick with us until the end, as we'll reveal which supermarkets come out on top for supplying the biggest percentage of Scottish produce in their Scottish stores. Before we stick a pound in our supermarket trolley and tour the grocery aisles, be sure to like and share this film, and subscribe to the Scotland channel. Your support means that we can continue to produce truly independent Scottish media without the negativity and gaslighting of Scotland by the mainstream Anglo-British media. And hit the bell icon to be notified of more great content from the Scotland channel. For more information about the Scotland channel, visit our website thescotlandchannel.tv. If there's anything most certain to rile many Scots these days, it's having the Union Jack plastered all over Scottish produce. And if you think it's not something most people in Scotland are bothered about as they fulfil the weekly chore of getting in the messages, you'd be wrong. According to a survey carried out on behalf of the national newspaper, 70% of Scots said that they would prefer to see the Saltire on food and drink products from Scotland rather than the British flag. So why does it matter to so many people in Scotland? Scots are rightly proud of their country, and when we say country, we mean Scotland, not so much Britain, which, unlike Scotland or England, isn't actually a country, although it is an internationally recognised state, for now at least. The political landscape in Scotland is rapidly changing as each year passes. More people now support Scottish independence than remaining in the Union. So many of these people in particular see the proliferation of Union Jacks on our food packaging as a deliberate and cynical attempt by the Anglo-British state to reinforce the Union at every opportunity. But is this true? The rationale behind the proliferation of Union Jacks on our groceries, especially since the disaster of Brexit, is to signal to consumers that the produce they're buying is locally sourced in Britain, but not so locally that they denote whether the produce is Scottish, English or Welsh, it seems, leading to suspicion that the hand of the British state is involved somewhere for purely political reasons. And there is some anecdotal evidence that producers have been encouraged, if not lent on by officials from the UK government, to add the Union flag on their packaging. We've even seen Scotch whisky being sold as British whisky in one upmarket grocery chain, and Great British Haggis too. We've also seen strawberries from the heart of Scotland's fruit-producing area around Tayside, also labelled as British. Ruth Watson of Keep Scotland the brand explains why putting Union flags on our food is such a bad idea, because it is so damaging to the provenance of the highly respected Scottish brand worldwide.
I started the Keep Scotland the brand campaign in 2017. Being a journalist that's worked in agriculture and fisheries and reporting on food and drink, I am very aware of the importance of the food and drink sector, not only to our national security, not only to our economy, but to our brand. It's recognised globally as well as at home. So the week before, I'd gone down and I'd bought carrots, which had come from a farm, just literally that I could see from the brae. And I went to buy them this week, and they weren't Angus carrots anymore. They were Great British carrots, and there was this half Union flag upon them, and they were product of the UK, which of course is technically correct, but because I understand the power of Scotland's brand, and also the reasons that people buy produce. I want to buy a local product if I can because it's got a lower carbon footprint. I want fewer carbon miles. I want to know where my food has come from. That's important to me. And I thought, that's new, that's odd. And I went back and I did a wee bit of digging because I'd noticed that the week before, the supermarket had just been selling ordinary food, and I could see where it came from by looking at the labels. But this, it was kind of like some kind of street bunting fest had gone mad, and suddenly everything was bedecked in Union flags, and I don't understand why there would be this sudden sort of flag fest. So I went and I did a bit of digging into it and found out more about the Great British Campaign and this sort of marketing idea. And that actually horrified me because I know the importance of Scotland's brand to Scotland's economy, and it's our unique selling point. So it caused me a great deal of concern, and I started speaking to food and drink producers, and I started speaking to politicians, and I started speaking to people within the industry. And that was when I realised that Scotland needed the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign.
Union flags started appearing on food packaging around 2014 following the independence referendum, and accelerated just after the Brexit vote, in which Scotland, as part of the UK, was dragged out of the European Union's single market, against its will, after England had voted by a wafer-thin majority to leave the bloc. This followed what can only be described as a sustained media campaign, giving Nigel Farage's Leave campaign wall-to-wall coverage. Nevertheless, Scotland voted overwhelmingly to remain, but was ignored despite pledges by the Better Together campaign in the run-up to the 2014 independence vote that the only way to guarantee staying in the EU was to vote to remain in the UK.
The Great British Campaign started in 2014. David Cameron in the Olympics 2011, 2012 had suggested it. Even the Daily Telegraph sort of lambasted him for it, said it was a ridiculous idea. But the Department for International Trade decided that that was what they were going to run with. And it became this big international, buy British, and we'll put a flag on it. Cool Britannia, I think it was going to be kind of, revisited. But then that started to have the impact on domestic sales. And that was when we started seeing it, for example, on carrots. And I'm not sure why they thought it was going to be this good idea, because especially with Brexit happening, I mean, maybe they had augurs of what might come with Brexit, and they thought they would sort of try and get this little plucky little rock. But it certainly wasn't going to work for Scotland's brand and the huge identity that we had built up over the years, this very valuable identity that we'd brought over many years. So, for example, when the Kenyan government wanted to develop a potato to help feed Kenyans through climate change and more, they came to Scotland because our seed potato industry was so recognised. If the seed potatoes being sold were Great British seed potatoes, well, Scotland would have lost out on that whole thing. And the Kenyans would have lost out on all that expertise, because Scotland's seed potatoes, for example, are internationally recognised because you can see the land here. The land is incredibly rich. The weather means we don't have a whole load of nasties in the ground. And the scientists and the farmers work incredibly closely together to make sure that the seed potatoes that are sold from Scotland are top quality, disease-free, reliable. It's an incredibly important industry. I was at a farmer's market, and one wee lassie, I mean, she was about that high, and I was talking to her about Scotland's brand and talking about potatoes, and said, do you know why that's important? She goes, yes, I do, because my mummy is a tatty roger, and she sorts through the potatoes that are going to be sold overseas. This wee mite, she got it. It took a lot of Scots to turn round and send the message to the industry before things started to change for the better. And the Great British Campaign is still there, but it is dissipating a little. And Scotland doesn't have the right to decide what labels go on food. Food labelling is a reserved issue. That means that is a Westminster government controls that. But market forces make a big difference. We cast a ballot every time we open our purses, and people were telling the supermarkets what they wanted. People were writing to customer services, they were speaking to people on the shop floor, and they were saying very clearly that they wanted to be able to buy Scottish produce, clearly labelled Scottish produce, and why that mattered. The food and drink sector has always done a huge amount of work to support Scotland's food and drink producers. Scotland's farming sector, the National Farmers Union of Scotland, they do a shelf watch campaign to see how well Scottish provenance is being displayed, because if we can see it on the label, we can put it on the table. So I was pushing an open door. People understood the importance of Scotland's brand. There's been a massive amount of market research done over the years looking at the power of Scotland's brand. Keep Scotland the Brand campaign's name grew out of this amazing marketing campaign that I really respected that started in the 1990s called Scotland the Brand. So that was discontinued through the early 2000s when a political group took power in Holyrood. And I could never understand why it was discontinued, because it was such an effective marketing campaign. So Keep Scotland the Brand is named in homage to that. So there's a lot of research being done about the importance of Scotland's name to universities, to food and drink, to businesses. And that really was filtering through to the public. And it was recognised that there had been a groundswell growth in the public's understanding of and appreciation of the importance of Scotland's brand and Scotland's name clearly being represented. Not in a jingoistic way, but in a way that just took that cognizance and that pride in this is our product, this is what we do this really well, please buy it. And that also then translates into this is who we are, because look, we can make this amazing stuff. We're clever, we're educated. Come to our country, you're going to love the holidays. There's a lot more to Scotland's brand than just carrots. But I was sitting in a Scotland food and drink event where they were talking about the importance of Scotland's brand. And I turned to this rather cherubic young gentleman standing beside me. And I said, that's amazing, all those statistics about how important Scotland's reputation is. He said, oh, it's amazing. He said, I work for a fruit packing company over in Perthshire. He said, a few years ago, we were being told, put Union flags on everything. He said, but the last year, all the supermarkets are coming to us and saying we want Scottish labelling again. He said, it's really good to see. That is the power of people telling producers what they want to buy. Be nice about it, use people power, use purse power, but say we want to keep Scotland the brand.
Scotland's food and drink sector is worth billions to the economy, and forecasts show that 1 in 4 Scots will be employed in the food and drink sector by 2030. Scottish provenance is good for global sales. Scotland is a well-respected, well-loved brand worldwide.
One of the reasons that I was so passionate about starting the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign, something which I did completely pro bono. I've never been paid for any of it. I did it all just because I thought it was the right thing to do and because I had the skills to do it. When I lived in Malaysia, I had a friend. We became friends over Orkney cheddar, and this gentleman was the buyer for a supermarket chain serving Malaysia and Singapore. This gentleman had a $30 million budget, and he could not get enough of Scotland's produce. When he sold Scottish water, beside it there was a little sign saying Scottish water filtered by Scottish granite for 10,000 years. And it cost almost 7 times the equivalent of like a big water cooler bottle of water. This guy would have a buyer bidding over the phone for the first line-caught salmon from Scotland's waters of the season, and he would have it flown over to this extremely upmarket supermarket where the local exotic fish would be swept away and this salmon would be given pride of place, and restaurants and upmarket people would bid to try and get the first piece of it. That's the power of Scotland's brand. This gentleman sold Scotch beef and Scotch lamb, and when I asked him why it was so important to him, he said everybody knows that Scotland is a natural country. Everybody knows they can trust Scottish produce. And that is the power of Scotland's brand. And if we lose that to homogenised, bland British campaigning, we lose so much more. So the person who goes and buys the Scottish water or buys the Scottish salmon or even a small piece of Orkney cheddar, they're buying into this vision of Scotland. They then plan their trip to go to Scotland. They then bring money to the economy. They send their children to Scotland to go to university. It's not just, it's about flags on food. I would rather see no flags on food. I don't see the point of flags on food. If you speak to somebody in Nigeria, they don't know what the Scottish Saltire represents, but they recognise the bagpipes and they recognise tartan. They recognise Scotland's name. It's not about flags on food. It's about clear provenance. It's about being able to make an informed choice about where your product comes from. Scotland's farmers, our food and drink producers, do an immense amount of work to make sure that our food is high quality, high welfare, and it is a product that can be trusted. There's a huge amount of work going into reformulating food to make sure that it's healthier, it's lower salt, it's lower sugar, it's high flavour, but it's natural flavours. And people across the world know that. People in London know that. People in Scotland know that. If we can see it on the label, we can put it on the table. And we were really running the risk of losing all of that. And it wasn't even purely a Scottish issue. There was a cheesemonger in the south of England would contact me, desperate about the impact that this campaign was having on their product in the south of England. If I see a box of Kentish strawberries, I know the reputation Kentish strawberries have. I'm prepared to pay a little extra for that because, oh my goodness, it's Kentish strawberries. I once had them when I was at Wimbledon. Oh yeah, they were amazing. I'll put them in my Pimm's. That's the power of England's brand. You lose that if everything becomes bland Britain.
Scotland's farm-assured Scotch beef is a protected geographic indicator, undergoing a rigorous inspection regime which guarantees quality. It is so much more meaningful than the ubiquitous little red tractor symbol. Scotland's farmers get, on average, £146 more per head of cattle than farmers in England and Wales do for their livestock. And with US trade talks already underway, talks in which Scotland, as part of the UK, will have no say, we face the very real prospect of our prime quality products ending up on supermarket shelves, alongside cheap American growth hormone injected, antibiotic-laden Black Angus steaks, now that we are no longer in the EU where such products are illegal, because of the evidence that those processes increase instances of cancer and antibiotic resistance in people. There will always be people who have no choice but to buy according to price. Too many people will never have the prospect of sitting down to a piece of prime Scotch beef beside new Ayrshire potatoes, with organic Angus carrots glistening under artisan Scottish butter. But, and this is crucial, whether you are buying a supermarket's budget brand line or their finest range, you should be buying food which is grown, reared and produced to the same standard. There are some who believe we should boycott produce carrying the Union Jack flag on packaging. But Ruth Watson believes that this is counterproductive.
From the very beginning of the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign, I was adamant that it was to be a positive campaign. Some people were saying, we should have boycotts of companies that are putting Union flags on produce or not standing up for Scottish produce. And I was like, no, that's not the way to go. Because there are, for example, there's a very, very famous biscuit manufacturer that has a bakery up in the north of Scotland. There aren't very many jobs in that area. That factory employs 800 people in a tiny community. If you have a boycott campaign, who's that going to hurt? It's going to hurt ordinary people. And if you're saying to people, you can't buy that Union flagged product because then you're letting the country down. Well, what happens if somebody lives somewhere like I do, where there's not another supermarket for 6 or 7 miles, or maybe they can't afford to buy artisanal or higher priced speciality produce, which might be the only product which is labelled Scottish, even though it's the same product in the punnets. So you're setting yourself up to fail, and also you're sending a message that it's them and us, or some people should be punished. And no, the way that we do this is with the power of positivity, having the confidence in our brand, having the confidence in knowing that the reason Scotland's brand matters is because it's high quality, it's worth millions to our economy, it's worth jobs, it's worth our cultural reputation, it's the reason people come here to study, to holiday, to move. All of these things are positive things. So if we want to make change, we talk to people, we explain to them that if we can't see Scottish butter, that's a big problem, because Scotland's dairy farmers are really in trouble because so many of their resources and assets are being sent to facilities south. If we're selling Scottish tatties, but they're being labelled as Great British tatties, that's a great big problem, because Scotland's got one of the best reputations for exporting seed potatoes around the world. You use the power of positivity and you show solidarity with those businesses that perhaps have been told that they have to brand their products that way by the supermarkets who are trotting in and out of 10 Downing Street all the time. These things, they don't just come about by magic. There's a huge amount of money goes into marketing and branding. And Scotland's farmers know that. Scotland's farmers have been branding Scotland's produce, raising our reputation to being a globally recognised on the finest tables across the Far East and elsewhere. People know if they eat Scotch beef, they're having a piece of meat from an animal that has had one of the best of lives that they could have. So when people are told, oh, well, you have to brand it this way, they're being hard put upon. And if we come round and say, we understand what's happening here and we want to show solidarity because Scotland's brand is hard won and it's easy lost, like a good reputation, well, that's solidarity and that wins you friends. So I say we cast a ballot every time we open our purse. And I'd rather have a friendly conversation with the cashier and say, Jings, that's awful, I can't get Scotch butter anymore, what's happened to it? And they go, oh, I know, it's terrible. You've made a friend. Somebody's been made more aware of the issue. And then you write to customer services. And there's free post. Most customer services now, it's either online or you can send a free post letter. And you say to them, I want to support Scottish farmers. And it's not just about the flag. It's never been about flags. It's about food security. It's about, if we don't have farmers here producing milk, or cows that produce the milk, then what happens if there's a heavy storm and the snow comes? What happens in Shetland, for example, where there used to be dozens of dairy farms across the Isles, and now they're down to one. And when the ferry doesn't come in, there's people chapping at the doors of the local shops, wondering where the milk is. Can they get a pint of milk? It's food security. We're looking at the climate emergency barreling towards us. We need more food grown locally. We need to support our farmers. We need to support farmers to address the biodiversity collapse. All of that happens if you've got a strong, confident sector. And as people are talking about bringing in genetically modified foods or genetically edited or precision genetically edited foods, I really hope the Scottish Government sticks to their guns and says fine for research, but never blanket across the fields, because that is Scotland's USP. People come to Scotland for natural food. Our reputation is global. People in London prefer to buy Scottish produce because they can see, they equate that with nature and with hygiene and clean water and a natural environment. That's the image that Scotland has around the world. We need to hold on to that and our name.
Scotland's brand is not only good for business, it is good for us all, and it is crucial not only for our own health, but that of our communities too. But here's the problem. Because Scotland is part of the Anglo-British state, our farmers, fishermen and drink producers are forced to rely on the government in England to take care of these matters on Scotland's behalf. And, as we have seen time and time again, Scotland's interests are so often sacrificed for England's wider interests. Can we be absolutely certain when push comes to shove that the UK government won't capitulate to US demands to lower standards and allow hormone-treated US beef onto our supermarket shelves, especially when the US government has made it clear that our protected geographic indicator protections and our food and animal welfare standards are considered obstacles to a trade deal with the US? And that should concern us all. So, has the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign had a positive impact in removing the Union flag from Scottish produce and reducing the threat which that causes to the Scottish food and drink sector? Ruth Watson believes it has.
Has the Keep Scotland the Brand campaign been a success? Well, it is something I have poured up to 18 hours a day sometimes into the campaign. It took a lot of work the first few years. A lot of social media, a lot of phone calls, a lot of tapping on doors, a lot of conversations with people within the sectors I was addressing, because I wanted to make sure that we were representing people, not just our own opinions. And I think so. I do think so. I look at a lot of research that has been done since the campaign started. And overwhelmingly, undeniably, people clearly say we want to support Scotland's brand. We want to see clear provenance. We want to buy local. And what's interesting is that for many people in Scotland, buying local can mean hyper-local. So here I am in Kerrymuir. I love buying local gin, love buying local butter. And there's a chocolatier who works in the neighbouring town that you can probably see behind me. Outstanding chocolates. I love buying hyper-local. Lots of people are like me, but also local means Scottish. For a lot of people, for most people across Scotland, Scotland is local. Overwhelmingly, I mean, it's up in the high 80%, people are saying they want to buy local where they can. You're never going to get Scotch bananas, but they want to buy local when they can. And if they can't, they want to see where it's come from so they can make a choice. And I think that is what it always keeps coming back to. People want to support Scottish farmers, Scottish food and drink producers. They have pride in the produce. They trust the produce. They trust our clean water, our publicly owned clean water. They trust the hills. They trust the fields. We drive past it. We see it. We trust it. Often we'll know farmers or people who are working in the food and drink sector. 1 in 5 people in Scotland are employed by the food and drink sector. Most of us know somebody works in a sandwich shop or delivering for a supermarket or working in a supermarket. We trust it, we want to buy it. The big problem with the Great British campaign, apart from its weird obsession with flags, is that we don't get to make those choices. We don't get to say, I want to support this farmer. We don't get to say, why can't I find Scottish butter? And hang on a second, what does that mean for the local processing? Does that mean that we're losing local processing and local infrastructure? Does that mean that farmers up in the northeast of Scotland can't make butter there locally anymore? Well, what happens if there are supply chain issues? What about our food security? What about the farmers there and the produce that we're getting? Where is it coming from? If I don't know where it's coming from, how can I trust it? How can I make an informed choice? And I think that's the thing, is it comes back down to, who do we think is going to work in our best interests? Do I think that a mega capitalist supermarket owner making billions with a retirement fund that most of us will never earn in our lifetimes, do I think that supermarket owner has got the best interests of my local community at heart? Do I think that if the snow comes down or there's another pandemic, do I think that they are really going to be caring about the farmer up the hill or the local butcher who actually spent time driving up and down to make sure that grannies up the glen were getting local meat? When the doodah hits the fan, we want local. We need local. If we lose local, we lose food security. The first duty of any government is to feed its people. I happen to think that many of the decisions that are made are better done at a local level. I want to see local councils doing more with local procurement to make sure that local food and drink is getting into local schools and old folks' homes and prisons. And I think it comes down, for me, politically, with a small p, it comes down to who do I trust to make decisions for me and my family. Do I trust somebody who's living many, many miles away, who has no understanding of what it means to be here, to live here? Or do I trust somebody who is part of the community, who can make those decisions based on understanding the needs of this community? I think that there's a lot to be said for friendships across borders. We import 60% of the food that comes into these islands, not just to Scotland, but to the whole of the British Isles. Do I think that it would be better if we had more local orchards producing apples and pears rather than importing them from New Zealand and from Canada? Yes, of course I do, because I worry about the climate emergency. I worry that with the climate emergency, perhaps some of those countries are going to not be able to export anymore because they're going to have to keep their food and their drink for their own communities. But I also know that there's resilience in trade. If I have a bad summer and there's no apples, well, perhaps our friends in Canada can send apples to us. So I think there's a balance to be struck, a delicate balance. I think part of that balance means having trade deals which ensure the food we get coming to our shores meets our high standards. There's a great concern at the moment that with some of the trade deals being done perhaps by a desperate post-Brexit government further south, some of those trade deals may not include the high standards. I think it is imperative that we keep the high standards of the farmers who produce the best of food. I think that Scotland's brand means when we buy a local product, we can trust it. I would like to think that would be the case always for imports as well. But I think that when we are buying a local product, especially from local farms that perhaps are employing local people, or providing good, fair, just employment to highly skilled workers who are coming from elsewhere, who are doing jobs that maybe we've got a wee bit soft, many of us don't want to do anymore. But I think that making sure that Scotland's brand stands for something. Our farmers, our food and drink sector, our scientists, our universities, our cultural custodians, the people who make our fabrics work really hard to make sure that we have the very best standards. If it's labelled clearly, we know we're not getting cheap knockoffs, we're getting the real deal.
So just how much locally produced Scottish produce is being sold in Scottish supermarkets? The National Farmers Union Scotland have urged supermarkets to increase the amount of Scottish produce they stock, as research has shown that just 17% of supermarket-owned brand items are being sourced in Scotland. So which supermarkets stock the highest percentage of Scottish produce on their shelves? We can reveal that Aldi leads the way with an average of 40% Scottish-sourced products, followed by Lidl at 30%, while Sainsbury's and Tesco lagged far behind. According to the National Farmers Union Scotland, Aldi consistently leads the way stocking 100% Scottish eggs, nearly 90% Scottish potatoes, and nearly 87% Scottish chicken in their Scottish stores. Lidl follows Aldi, with 30% of its own label products coming from Scottish producers. They are followed by the Co-op, with 22% of their products being Scottish. Tesco is next, stocking 11% Scottish products in their Scottish stores, Asda at 10%, and Sainsbury's at just 8%. Collectively, shoppers have the power to shape policy and support local producers. In Scotland, that means Scottish. After all, Scottish shoppers supporting Scottish producers would be a good thing for everyone living in Scotland. And it's about far more than which flag is flown on our food. We hope you have found this film informative. For details of other films from the Scotland Channel, visit our website, thescotlandchannel.tv, or visit our YouTube page at thescotlandchannel/videos. Thank you for watching.